All right, there is a nomination. I don't see Ally. There's a nomination for Ally Zaror as chair. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. And, all right, are there any further nominations? All right, all in favor?
I might ask one question. Do we know for sure that she would accept?
I don't know that for sure. We could ask her, though, which is part of the reason of being on time, right, Ellie?
You didn't just start 2 minutes ago?
We just started 2 minutes ago. And you've been nominated as chair with second, if you're interested in serving.
It looks like the only question is that okay with you?
Very good. All right. Not hearing any further nominations. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, the new chairman. Tom, do we want to, would Ally take over now at this point for this meeting? All right, very good. Welcome, Ally. Good to see you.
So the next item would be to take a nomination for the vice chair.
Just like the next item on the agenda would be to take the nomination for the vice chair. Do we have any nominees? I said, then looks like the next nomination would be to take nominations for the vice chair. Do we have any nominees?
I nominate Ron Brew.
Second?
Mr. Brewer accepts.
So we'll need to have a vote then. So just call for ayes and nays.
Can I get a vote of ayes, please?
Aye.
Any nays? So be it.
Do they have the minutes? So the next item would be to call for a motion to approve the minutes from the prior meeting as they've been presented in your packets.
Can I get a motion to approve the meetings from the last, or for the minutes from the last meeting?
Move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Second.
And then call for ayes and nays.
Can I get a roll call of ayes?
Aye.
Can we get a vote of aye? Sorry. Any nays? Any nays? No. Appears that the minutes are approved.
All right, that brings us to our public hearing with respect to the Second Amendment to the Independence Square Tax Increment Financing Plan. I'm going to start by passing out a TIF area map for some of you that may not be familiar with the boundaries. I went ahead and printed this out, and I'll pass it around to each of the members.
Thank you.
That appears to be the same thing. So I'm David Martin with Gilmore and Bell. I serve as Economic Development Counsel to the city, and I'm here in that respect today. The map that I just passed out to you is the current boundaries of the TIF area. The boundaries have not changed since the initial passage of the plan, and we are not attempting to make any amendment to the boundaries today. I just wanted everyone to know what they were so that you can focus on the area that we're discussing. So as the first part of the hearing, I would like to offer onto the record the exhibit list for this hearing, which has been circulated previously by email to each member of the commission. I'll go through the items just by title. The first is the roster of the Tax Increment Financing Commission. The second is the Second Amendment itself. The third is the notice of public hearing that was mailed to the taxing jurisdictions. And then for the fourth, we have affidavits of publication for the 2 required publications for this hearing. And then notices of TIF Commission hearing that were mailed to the property owners. And finally, Exhibit 6 is the Sunshine Law notice of TIF Commission hearing that was posted 4 business days prior to this hearing. All of those items are just legal requirements in order to properly call a TIF hearing, and so form the basis for the legality of this meeting. I'll pass it over to Tom to give you an overview of what the Second Amendment accomplishes and the reason for it.
Good evening. My name is Tom Scannell. I'm the Community Development Director here with the city. So yes, as David mentioned, this is the Second Amendment to the Independence Square TIF. The original TIF was approved back in December of 2013, so we are about 11 years into the life of this TIF. Back in 2017, I believe it was, there was the First Amendment to the TIF, make a slight adjustment to the what was considered a public improvement, which allowed some funds to be used for the Independence Uptown market. So the Second Amendment to the TIF is changing the allocation of how the money can be spent. The current TIF plan calls for 90% of the TIF revenues to be spent on facade and structural improvements to the buildings within the TIF district, with the other 10% to be spent on the public infrastructure. The purpose of the square TIF, again, it goes back to making repairs or reconstructing or enhancing the curb, sidewalk, streets, so basically the public improvements within the TIF district. And the other purpose was to fund, as I mentioned, the facade and structural improvements. Both of those are used to address blight. A number of communities have used infrastructure and other improvements to spur economic development, and that is staff's thinking on this TIF amendment. Going to the proposed changes, I mentioned about the 90-10 split, with 90% of the funds going towards the facades and structural improvements. That change, so what this plan would change it to is 65% of the revenue generated from the TIF would go towards public improvements. Again, the streets, curb, gutter, sidewalks, those types of things. So the public improvement, as the slide shows, would increase from a little under $630,000 to about $4.1 million over the life of the TIF. The facade and structural improvement bucket would decrease from that 5.6 million down to 2.2 million. As David mentioned, there's no other changes besides just changing how the funds can be used in order to implement the TIF plan. So that concludes staff's presentation. I'll turn it back to David.
So I'm going to add just a couple items to what Tom has described. As he mentioned, the purpose of this amendment is to allow for a reallocation of the public versus private uses in this TIF plan. It is not changing at all the total amount to be reimbursed from TIF funds. That remains at just under $6.3 million. What this amendment does is it allows for a reallocation of up to 65% of that amount to the public improvements, whereas, as Tom mentioned previously, it was more heavily allocated to private improvements. So this amendment by itself does not automatically change that allocation. It just allows the city to allocate up to that 65%. And then some of the language in the plan that relates to public improvements as originally written anticipated that there would be submission for grants, and that the plan funds would be sort of a cost sharing, whatever balance that might have been, whatever percentage cost share would have been required under those grants. The city has had difficulty in receiving grants for this purpose, and so this amendment also eliminates the language dealing with grants, so they could certainly still pursue and receive grants, but it wouldn't be a requirement as the expenditure of TIF funds that there be a grant in place for a public improvement. And we can take questions now, or we can go through the public comment session and then return for questions. It's really your choice.
I have a question. On the original proposal, we were to spend money on facade and structural improvement on private buildings. Has any of that taken place?
Yes, so far to date, 28 property owners have applied, and about 20 of those projects have been completed. As outlined in the TIF plan, the city developed those guidelines, just at a high level what those are. A maximum amount that can be spent is, or that can be reimbursed, is $50,000. There's an 80-20 split, so the TIF pays for 80% of those improvements, and they must be facade or structural improvements. As I mentioned, 28 projects have made application, about 20 have been reimbursed, with another 8 that are still working through making the necessary facade and structural improvements.
I had a question. Is the impetus for that allocation because there is a need for sidewalks and streets, or is it more because you feel like that you've received pretty much all of the requests that you're likely to receive on the private side and are well under the amount that was originally allocated for that?
So it's more of a need for the infrastructure. The infrastructure that is on the square is old. Sidewalks, curbs, there's cracking, they're uneven, they're a hazard, and so the city, if this change were to take place, as David mentioned, up to 65% could be used to for public improvement projects within the square TIF boundary.
Thank you.
So at this point, if the dais is done with current questions, it would be appropriate to open it up for public comment, and questions such as that would be appropriate during that time period.
I'd now like to open this up for public comment, please.
So if you'd like to make a comment, please come up to the lectern.
There's been an analysis done on the cost of like materials compared to when we opened.
Henry Pearlie, St. Paul AME Church, which is right to the east of here, of the City Hall. My question is, do we have to make an application to get this TIF for doing
recovery work, and the recovery work I'm looking at is that they were talking about the sidewalks. The sidewalks over there have dropped that the older people that are going to the church, including myself, we're taking the chance of falling. So does this come under that category of a TIF that would be going in to help pay for to upgrade those sidewalks?
So there is no application to make for the public sidewalks. Those are projects that the city would use these funds to undertake those. So that is not for the property owners to individually apply for to improve the sidewalks outside of their property. Again, they're going to be city projects that we will undertake all at one time.
Okay. So what I'm trying to find out is on right-of-ways, and this is a right-of-way, this is a sidewalk, it's used by the city. This is a city right-of-way. Everybody has a right-of-way to walk up and down those sidewalks. So being, as we're a part of the historical part of Independence, I don't think that we should be taking the full amount or pulling the full amount of paying for that. So that's what I'm trying to find out is how do we go about getting the city to help us take care of some of that?
So what I would recommend is you talk to the city's municipal services staff.
I'm doing that and have been doing that, and I've talked to, one of our, I forget what his name is right now, but I've talked to one of them, and he said he was going to be checking on that to seeing about that, and that it should be considered into being put into place. So I'm just trying to figure out, when you look at the monies for fixing this, and I'm going to be fixing it for everybody within the city to be walking up that sidewalk, that's quite a bit of money to be putting out for a property owner. And so that's the first part. I'll stop with that. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Scannell, I have a question. So how are the public improvements prioritized, and how would someone like the church advance his request in the priority of public improvements?
So what I would recommend is as that is handled by a different department, I would talk to that department to see how they prioritize those, what's next as far as the priority goes, how they go about grading the sidewalks, which ones get fixed, which ones don't, and have that conversations with the municipal services staff.
Okay, so there has been ongoing work for the public portion of this TIF.
Correct, yes. In the central part of the TIF boundary, that is going to be the first phase that where the sidewalks, curbs, and gutters will be replaced. I believe that construction is going to take place or start after the first of the year. I think January or February is when that's going to take place. Not exactly sure when the next phase is going to take place or what part of the square that would encompass.
Okay.
Approximately how many private properties are within this district?
think it was somewhere between 130 and 150. Does that seem right? Based on the mailings?
I think so. I have to go back.
So we'd have to go back and sort of hand count, but I think that's a reasonable approximation.
David, I think the plan said there was like 44 in the first phase, and there's a total of 255 parcels.
So parcels, I suppose, I'm not sure. We were mailing to property owners that may have owned more than one parcel. So some of those, based on the number I'm giving, is just the addressees for the required notice. So that may be accurate while still only having 150 property owners.
Well, I'm concerned in the last 10 years that we've only had 28 applications.
My name's Austin Conley, 206 North Liberty Street. I'm a resident property owner and business owner within the TIF district. The reason, to answer that question specifically, that there have only been such a limited number of applications is because this facade program was not officially started until approximately 4 years ago. Is that correct? So all of these have been relatively recently. I'm actually one of the 20 people that has completed one of these projects. We completed structural work, tuck pointing that had been neglected for close to 100 years. And we also, because of the way that this TIF is structured, we actually had the Buck Stops Here Harry Truman mural is on the side of our building. All public art that you have seen added to the square within the last 5 years is solely because of this TIF. People have been able to really get into some of the deferred maintenance of these buildings and do really great work. I, as a property owner, am open to seeing some changes done to this, but I think that this, in my personal opinion, my opinions are not. I serve on nonprofits boards around the city, and these are solely my opinions, not those of anyone else. But the city was given access to their 10% of these funds and completed one project, while the private sector, in a much shorter amount of time, has made much more meaningful progress along to this, and in the vein of what I view as what the TIF was started to do. This was not communicated to the property owners other than the letter. We, as board members of the Independence Square Association, within the last 6 months have reached out to the city about making possible changes to this that would allow this money to flow faster to the private sector, whether that be increasing the maximum amount from $50,000 to a different arbitrary number, or one of our stated goals of the Independence Square Association is to bring more residents to the area, and we were asking if it was possible for maybe interior renovations, if somebody were to add residential units, if that were something. We were told that meaningful changes like that could not be made to the TIF outside of the first 10 years of negotiation or of implementation, and now we're at year 11, and what I was told may not be true, but that was from city staff, and this seems like a pretty meaningful change, going from 90-10 to 65-45 inverted. And I would just like everyone here to ask some meaningful questions. There's, I don't know how familiar you are with the square, but many of the businesses that have added blade signage and lit signage, Sunshine Sports Apparel, the Marinello, Mixed Mutton Company just did a complete facade redo, would not have been possible without this. The reason that you've seen a limited number of projects is because, like this gentleman, a lot of people don't know about it. The only people that have been pushing this out have been local nonprofits explaining this to building owners. So if you look each year, the number of applicants has continued to increase, and we expect that to continue going forward. So, I think many of the property owners are open to seeing some changes, but it seems like this was just kind of thrown upon us, and I don't know that you're going to have a lot of agreement from the private sector, at least from my seat. So thank you guys very much for your time.
more public testimony. Anyone else would like to come up?
Hello, my name's Trevor Tilton. I am a building owner, a business owner here on the Independence Square. I'm also the president of the Independence Square Association. Again, all my views, not of my organization, but a lot of my organization. I just have a couple of questions that I don't really understand, and I don't want to be ignorant. So, from my understanding, everything is projected on, like, all these numbers are figured on projections over the life of the TIF. Is that correct?
So the numbers that we're talking about changing the allocation with respect to are maximums that can be reimbursed under the TIF plan. The actual revenues that will be collected for that purpose may be less than that. So that was based on a projection at the time that the TIF plan was originally adopted. But the numbers that we're talking about are limits to where if you reach that limit, we can't legally provide reimbursement in excess, even if there are revenues available for that purpose.
Okay, so my next question is, when the city took their 10%, they pretty well maxed out their 10% with the farmer's market. I think it was just shy a little bit from what I'm reading, but they took that all out at once. What is the balance of the current account? At last I checked, it was somewhere around the 1.2, 1.3 million that's actually in the TIF. And if that change is made and the city has $3 million of this lifetime of TIF, does that mean they can just go in and take all the money from the account at once, being that's 65%, but there's not 65% in there? Or is it split 65, 35 with relevance to the balance of the account?
Tom, do you want to take that? Do you know the account balance?
Let me look that up if you want.
Okay.
Because, like I said, we've done a lot of great things with this TIF, and we've been able to do, I mean, the square looks a lot better. I've been president for 6 years or so, I think, and we've made huge strides. And, you know, I agree, maybe it is, like, there is excess money in there, but if we just totally get rid of this program, and if they're able to take all the money at once and shut the facade program down, and I mean, then we wouldn't be able to do facades for years until the account recoups.
So we have addressed this question in the past in discussions with city staff, and the answer was, and this is under the old 90-10 rule even, that we can't take the percentage of the total projected number because you may never reach the total projected number. So at any given point, they could take, you know, up to 65% of what had been and is available, and then 65% of what becomes available. But they wouldn't just take 100% of what's in the account on the basis of we think that's going to be less than 65% eventually.
Okay. I mean, it's still a huge chunk, and we're just starting to cook with gas with this thing on getting these facades done. It's going to be more so when the streetscape is finished. So I think we're going to get a lot of applications over that. I hear a lot of public art is contemplated right now on buildings, and cornice improvements. I mean, I think that we're getting on a roll, and to take this money when, I mean, just that much, it'll stifle the program, and it'll kill what we've accomplished so far. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
So to answer the question on what the TIF fund balance is, as of June 30 of 24, it was just under $1.1 million is sitting in that allocation fund.
I had a question. You mentioned that it's up to 65%. Is it a first come, first serve as far as applications? So if private applications come in, would that 65% come down? Or is that, once that 65%, if it were approved, then that's no longer available to private?
So basically what this would do is, now this balance restriction already exists, it's just 90-10. So it increased that 10% to 65%. But the city could never have taken at any point more than 65% of the total funds that became available. So it's not like it would necessarily cut off specific applications, but certainly it's reducing the amount of money that would be available for private property applications.
David, I have a few clarification questions for Tom and David. On this particular TIF, this is a pay-as-you-go, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we mention the fund balances, is that both the pilots and the EATs combined, or what are those separately?
That fund balance includes both the pilots and EATs.
Okay. Then, with regards to the pilots and the EATs, are you capturing 100% of that, of the pilots and the EATs, or is there a limitation on that?
I believe this plan is a true statutory TIF, so all of those revenues would be captured. There's not a surplus sharing.
So in essence, this is a super TIF. You're getting 100%.
Well, it's a standard TIF. A super TIF is where the city or another governmental entity adds money in addition to the pilots and needs. So this is just a full statutory TIF.
So they're on the increment. It's not 50% of the increment. You're getting 100% of the increment.
Of the property tax increment and
Okay.
50% of the sales tax
Well,
increment.
David, you and I, in our professional lives, may have a different understanding on the definition of a super TIF, but you're getting 100%, and that's what I wanted to know. When I look at the original projections, and several people have asked where that is at, and total TIF revenues were projected at 6.2 million. And I think it's important for what we're doing today and understanding what the city wants to do with the changes. If you go to page 17 of the original plan dated 2013, if you can, or you guys, and it may be a subsequent follow-up to this question. If, in doing a side-by-side comparison of the project, of the budget, of the original budget, the change with the amendment in 2017 to add the farmers market, and then with this second amendment that we are being asked to consider the change from 1090 to 6535. And if you do the calculation on page 17, the public allocation, that's a five-fold increase that you're going to there. And on the private, you're decreasing on the reimbursement, as everyone can see, 5.6 million down to 2.2. That's a significant reduction of 61%. So when I look at this, and Denise had the original question, is part of the purpose of this is you're having difficulty getting matching grants. Because somewhere in the original plan, your first matching grant was to be obtained by 2014. And was that ever accomplished?
No, the city did not get that grant.
Okay. So the purpose, it would seem to me, of the original plan, obviously the public improvements were needed, but is really to spur the private investment on the square and get the redevelopment going on the square. And if you're taking a big chunk of that money, and if you do the calculation on page 17, I think it would suggest an even further funding gap of those costs versus the TIF reimbursements. And if you're not getting the matching grants and you're trying to solve some of that gap problem in reality with what I think is going on here, the sources and uses here might need to be further analyzed as to what you're really accomplishing here. And I did hear from the public, the cap is $50,000. Is that preventing applicants from tapping into this?
We haven't heard any about that. There have been, as the public has mentioned, so over the last four years that this has been in place, that cap at $50,000 has been in place. It's that 80-20 split. I think the first year it was a 50-50, and we quickly changed that to an 80-20 split. But we have not heard that $50,000 has been something that prevents applicants from coming in. They have said that they are starting to gain traction there. So one of the things that I could offer is potentially we table this for about 75, 90 days. Let us have the conversation with the property owners, the business owners, see if we can come to an agreement of how this TIF amendment should be structured and bring that forward. So
Tom, you're suggesting we consider tabling this request today until you guys can go back and look at the numbers, particularly page 17, how you're calculating that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's real important for the committee to understand what gaps, funding gaps, and how the city is going to identify that other than changing the percentage allocations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it might be I don't want to say, you guys have done good work, but it might be a bit premature to consider this until there's some further analysis of the side-by-side budgets and what the implication really is to the overall budget.
Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, looking at some possible dates, trying to avoid some holidays. We have quite a few coming up, a couple in November and December, but looking out to January, possibly the middle to late part of January, if we could, I think David said if that should occur, we should schedule it to a date certain.
So you can continue this hearing to a date certain by a vote on the minutes, but it needs to be a specific date and time.
So are you suggesting January then?
Yeah, just throwing out a couple dates here. January 15th, January 22nd, January 29th. As possible dates, yes.
Can I ask a quick question? When you say you're going to go back out to the public and verify some of this information, will that be by letter, by survey, by open meeting?
No, we would have communication with business owners, property owners, up on the square.
So you're just going to go, I mean, like bond fund?
Yeah.
You're going to go in and, but how will we see those results? I guess that's what I'm.
We would bring that back as part of the plan to the TIF Commission in January.
Tom, part of that I think is important too, being the ex-commercial banker that I am. David, Tom, if you guys came to me, let's say when I was at Bank of America and you gave me these TIF projections and you're asking me to finance it and monetize it, as I look at the 23-year TIF schedule, projected TIF revenues, we're in year 11, right? So it's a 23-year TIF, that's 12 more years. I guess where I'm getting to is how accurate are these projections if you guys were to monetize it and go out and get a bond financing and you assume the rates and all this and that? And I know I don't expect an answer today, but is it close to this, or are there going to be adjustments, particularly on the east side? Have the sales and the non-real estate taxes, have they met the projections? It's just something, I don't need an answer today to look at.
Yeah, I would assume, based on the money that's in the account currently, what's been withdrawn, and the original projections, that unless something changes, which is, possible over that time period, that the ultimate collections would come in less than originally projected.
I just want to make sure that everyone else got an opportunity to have public testimony. I know we're going a little bit back and forth, but if you'd like to come and testify, please step up.
My name is Alversia Pettigrew, and I've been a member of St. Paul AME Church over here from way before the time that this was Nolan Road at one time. When I was a kid growing up and St. Paul was where it is now, Nolan Road moved, but our church never moved. This is the first communication that we ever received in the form of a certified letter that I had to go get at the post office and sign for. And according to this letter, the original plan you're talking about, that something took place in 2013. And if we are within the boundaries of this area you're talking about, we fall into those boundaries, from Nolan Road to Spring, and from White Oak to Walnut. So as Mr. Pearlie was asking, and I don't know what kind of answer he got, really, I couldn't hear, about sidewalks being unlevel. What about foundations? You're talking about the foundations that were fixed up on the square and murals added. So just where do we as a church stand with this committee as far as what we can apply for, who we apply to for it? Just why are we included in it? What is our eligibility for any kind of TIF funds?
So, yeah, I'll just start with the easiest question at the end. You're included in the notice because you're within the boundary, and everyone within the boundary for either the original TIF plan or an amendment of this nature is afforded the opportunity to do exactly what you're doing now, which is provide comments and questions to the TIF Commission. As far as eligibility for the program, it's a city-administered program. I'll let Tom answer as far as basically the process he earlier described relating to how a private improvement can apply for TIF dollars.
I was hoping David's answer was going to be a little bit longer to give me a little more time to look up the answer. But so I was going through the facade and structural improvement application, and ineligible properties include those properties that are tax delinquent properties, properties with outstanding code violations, properties in litigation, mediation, condemnation, or receivership. So I'm not seeing anything in these guidelines that would prohibit a church or a not-for-profit from applying for these facade and structural funds.
And to whom do we apply?
Me?
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that an application online or something?
No, it's not online.
Okay. So then you come to the office.
Yeah.
Do you want
Is there anyone else that would like to give public testimony?
Okay, with her after the meeting.
I just have a clarifying question. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing correctly, that you're saying that sidewalks and
Correct, yes.
So the commission can continue with whatever discussion it would like to at this time, but what I'm hearing is we probably need someone to, after that discussion, make a motion to continue this hearing to a date specific. So one of the discussion items should be what date works out for most of the commissioners.
Is there any further discussion on the board?
Well, I still have a lot of questions. Was the original back in 2013 submitted by the Independence Square Association for the TIF?
So the original TIF plan back in 2013, it was a city-initiated TIF.
The city initiated it?
Correct.
Well, I have some real concerns about a decrease of facade and structural improvement by $3 million. I have some concerns about why we only had 28 applicants over a 10, 12-year period of time. Seems to me like there's a lot of buildings in that 150 or 200 private properties that could certainly use some attention. I think I heard the president of the Square Association say that it didn't really get started until about 4 years ago. So it seems to me that maybe we've had some lack of communication to these businesses about what's available to them. I don't know. I just know that there's, as I drive around the square, there's a lot of improvements that could be made. I don't know why that's not taking place.
Additional clarification, if we do postpone this 75 to 90 days, could applications for private facade work continue during that time period, or would it freeze everything?
No, applicants can still apply for the facade and structural. There's no moratorium on applications, so those can still come in, and we can still process those, review those, and get those out.
We're just postponing, tabling the action on the second.
That's correct,
amendment.
yes. Yep. Yep.
So everything's still operative the way it is.
Right, everything that's in place will continue to operate during that period.
Any further discussion?
So I'm sorry to interrupt. We need to be careful not to close the public hearing, because that's what we're continuing. But certainly, if you want to offer dates for continuance, that's appropriate.
I'd like to offer a date of continuance of January 15th, 22nd, or 29th.
Just like to comment that the Southwest 353 meeting is that night, so if there's any way we could do maybe the 22nd, just a question.
Okay.
Anyone on the 22nd? Does that work for a majority?
And we'll need a time as well, so it could be 4 p.m. again.
Does 4 p.m. work? Or 4 o'clock?
Okay, that week is that?
It's a Wednesday.
Do you want a motion? Move to table this and hold a meeting on January the 22nd at 4 p.m. in these chambers.
I would second that.
So before we vote, as a clarification, it's a move to continue the public hearing to that date and time.
Clarification to move and continue the public hearing to the 22nd at 4 o'clock.
That sounds good. You want me to make it again?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
If we have a second, we can move forward to a vote.
Let's move forward to a vote. All say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
So we will not consider the resolution at this time, so we can move on to other business. I assume unless someone on the dais has other business to offer, there is none. And then you can call for a motion to adjourn.
Call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.